But I wanted to finish this thought. I thought it was useful and important. So Louise and I are watching Elementary, the Sherlock Holmes show. And this guy makes this comment. You know, they're like, did you kill him or whatever, and he's like, and he demonstrates to them, he proves to them, he's got 30 days to live. He's dying of recurring, relapsing something or other, leukemia of some kind. And he's like, I understand why I could be considered a suspect. I have no fear of the death penalty. But I'm not. And it turned out he was or he wasn't. I frankly don't remember now. But I'm sitting there going, whoa, I just got an epiphany. This is like, whoa. Back in 1634, when Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan, he said famously that without the iron fist of church or state, man would revert to his primal nature. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's close to the actual words you can find when you plug Thomas Hobbes and Leviathan into a search engine. But man will revert to his primal nature, which is, he said, without and lose civilization. Without civilization, there'll be no means of transportation. There will be no means of moving heavy objects from place to place. There will be no arts, no letters, and life will be nasty, brutish, and short. And that was the understanding that people had in the 17th century of how humans lived for 200,000 years. We all lived, cavemen, beat each other up. Life was horrible. Turns out the more we learn, the more we discover that life was actually pretty damn good for most of those 200,000 years. And it depended on where you lived. But so he starts out with kind of an affirmation of the story that is told in Genesis, which is that we're all evil. God is angry with all of us, and it's all because of some woman made a mistake, because Eve ate the apple. And therefore, every man born of, and there's all kinds of misogyny built into that story, but it's, and it came out of that culture of the time and all that kind of stuff. But basically the story is, all have fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned and fallen short and are in need of salvation, essentially. Whether that salvation is religious or whether it's political or whether it's whatever. We can't trust ourselves. And this has become the core conservative argument ever since then. If we can't trust ourselves to govern ourselves, and we all agree and understand that governance is necessary, then how do we figure out who's going to govern us? Now, keep in mind, this is 1634. There were no democracies at that point in time. I mean, there was some small functional semi-democratic states in what were called the lowlands, what is now Holland or the Netherlands. But that was pretty much it. So this was, a statement that in a way kind of justified things. But Hobbes went on to suggest, but self-governance should be possible if we can just figure out who the good people are. Which then led into two lines of thinking. One was from the religious folks. This was the whole John Calvin, Calvinistic worldview. Oh, well, the way we find the good folks is they're the people who God has blessed. Which then leads to the second line of thinking. How do you know who God blessed? I mean, do you go into a monastery and pull out a bunch of monks and say, okay, you're now the president, you're the head of the Senate, you're the, is that what you do? Is there some kind of conspicuous visual evidence of God's blessing? Are we looking for handsome people as opposed to people who are less attractive? How do we know? And the answer, of course, that was provided by the wealthy people of the time was wealth. Money is proof of God's blessing. And so rich people should rule. Because people are essentially evil and need that iron fist of church or state. Well, then, 100 years later, in the late 1700s, I think it was in 48, as I recall, that John Locke wrote his second treatise on government, and maybe 20 years after that that Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote, The Man's Rise from Savagery. I'm forgetting the exact title, but his famous book, about the noble savage. In other words, suggesting that, no, the natural state of humans is not to have, nasty, short, brutish lives. The natural state of humans is to be decent to each other. And the few people who step outside of that realm, the people who do commit murder, the people who do commit robbery and rape, they're defective or broken people. They're not normal. And that became the founding principle of the United States. It got essentially written into the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson, who was a big believer in this, at least as it applied to white men. It got written into the Declaration of Independence by Jefferson. It got essentially written into the Constitution. I mean, it's a founding principle of our country that we can govern ourselves. Now, conservatives to this day are fighting that, both religious conservatives who are saying, oh, no, you need to follow whatever Jerry Falwell Jr. tells you, and political conservatives who are associated with billionaires who are saying, and giant corporations who are saying, no, we really need to just kind of let the magical free market, right, which has become its own religion. But the epiphany that I had was kind of putting these two things together. If Hobbes was right, if conservatives are right, that the basic nature of humans is evil, that the only thing that is restraining any of us, me, Shano, Danielle, Chris, Troy, you, from running out tomorrow morning or right this second and just killing somebody for the sheer pleasure of it, or robbing them because they got something that you want, or committing, raping them or something. The only thing that's preventing us from doing that is fear of punishment. This is the theory behind the death penalty. Right? The death penalty deters people from killing people because they're afraid of dying. They're afraid of the death penalty. Now, that's the conservative logic, and that's the worldview that has prevailed since the 1600s. And it suddenly hit me watching this elementary show last night that this guy just gave us the perfect test. I'm sitting in a city right now, Washington, D.C., of about 1 million people. And there's probably somewhere between 5 and 50,000 of those million people, between, what would that be, a hundredth, 5/100ths of a percent, or 5/10ths of a percent, who are dying and know that they're dying. And some of them are probably still capable of walking around and pulling a gun on you. So why is it that when people get the death sentence, and it eventually happens to all of us, some, get notice, some don't. I'm inclined personally to not want the notice, but whatever. Why is it that people don't run out and become criminals? Because they don't have to worry about punishment, right? They're going to die anyway. Well, the obvious answer is that whole conservative worldview all along was wrong. That Rousseau and Jefferson were right, and Locke, and Hobbes, and all the conservative philosophers that have basically come since him. Sir Edmund Burke, was one of the great proponents of the idea that humans are essentially evil. That's why we have to have government. And to this day, that's the core principal concept. It's why they fight things like welfare programs. Oh, people are evil. You give them money, they'll use it for drugs. We've got to drug test those people. Well, it turns out people on food stamps are less likely to take drugs than people who aren't on food stamps. Big surprise. They have no money. But beyond that, it's still, we're talking 2 or 3%. And that's, it's just, so I think that I had never had the argument before that I could make to say, okay, if you believe, as as you know, the core, central, number one beginning point for virtually every conservative argument, even arguments against Social Security. If you believe that people are essentially evil and they're always going to try to rip people off, then why is it that people don't go nuts when they find out they're going to die?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And by go nuts, I mean become, you know, vicious killers or, you know, robbers or whatever it may be. Why don't they do that? Because that's not our nature. It's not our core nature.